The MyCom Podcast is sponsored by Educational Opportunities Tours. EO Tours offers journeys of a lifetime. For over 51 years, they've offered standard journeys and customized tours for individuals, churches, and organizations. Contact them at www.eo.travel or 1-800-247-0017.
For all of the disadvantages we might feel like we face as churches trying to make an impact in the noisy and distracted world of social media and the wider internet, the church does have one major advantage, and that's content. I mean, think about it. Most churches have someone delivering a new talk ranging anywhere from 18 to sometimes 30 or 40 minutes every week, week in and week out. We have spent many episodes of this podcast talking about how to repurpose and extend this content, from identifying clips that can work as standalone 30 to 90-second vertical videos, to using AI tools to turn your sermon into all sorts of content formats. But what about the full sermon video itself? Is it doomed to simply be archived on Facebook or YouTube forever? Or are there things we can do to enhance them and turn them into effective content marketing assets too? On this episode of the MyCom Church Marketing Podcast, we welcome back three-time guest Kathryn Price. She's a video producer for United Methodist Communications, and she's here to help us get the most out of the largest and most regular piece of content our churches create. Thank you to everybody for listening. My name is Dan Wunderlich. I'm a United Methodist pastor. And Kathryn, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Well, the last time you were on was the fall of 2020. We were talking about, before we hit record, that was right after General Conference had been postponed. And now this episode is going to air right before that General Conference actually happens. And I don't know about you, but for me, it feels like a decade ago, not 3.5 years ago. So first off, thanks for coming back. And secondly, how are you doing? How has life been the last 3 or 4 years?
Thank you for having me back. Yeah, it feels like it's been a long time and not long at all, because we're doing some of the same things that we did back then. So, it's been great.
Well, this fall we had you, or that fall, I should say, we had you on for 2 episodes to talk about tips for live streaming and some basic video production, pre-recorded video tips. And if my memory is working properly, that late summer, early fall of 2020 was when I think it really sunk in that the world was changing, the world had changed, that ministry had changed, and perhaps some of the systems that we had cobbled together in the spring of 2020 really needed to become more robust and sustainable. I mean, literally at my church that first Sunday, March 15th of 2020, we were using the webcam on my laptop. The next Sunday, we moved to iPhones and iPads as the cameras. But it was around that time that we talked to you that my church moved to a PTZ, a pan-tilt zoom camera setup that we're still using to this day. So as a video producer yourself, I'm curious about your perspective on, did we rise to the challenge? How are our churches? How are our conferences? How's our denomination doing as a whole, adjusting to this new world 4 years later?
Right. I think that everybody's still adjusting a little bit. I don't think that everybody expected it to become so a part of the norm like it has been. But I think for the most part, everybody's done a great job at adapting and taking advantage of the extra time. Well, I don't know if it was extra time, but the required time to figure out and experiment what would work for them and for their congregation. And I think it also was a great opportunity for church members who did have a background in video production or cameras or anything. They were able to step up and help their churches, which I think is a great thing for just at building that connection. So even though it's still a bit of an adjustment to juggle both the in-person and the virtual, internet is no longer an option. So I think it was important to sort of be forced to embrace it and figure it out when we did.
Absolutely. Oh, obviously, you had some of the mega churches and bigger churches, and even some church plants who are maybe more technology forward that were already streaming. And then I serve what I consider to be a fairly standard and average United Methodist church, and it was certainly on our radar to move towards streaming, but we hadn't pulled the trigger yet because I wanted to research it and I wanted to learn all the things you ended up teaching us later that fall. But the moment called us, and I'm proud of especially the audience of our podcast for the way that they've held in and hung on and embraced this new world. And what I think is really interesting is that there isn't really one standard way that we're ministering online. I would say do that kind of fly on the wall type of streaming, the camera in the back of the room or somewhere in there capturing what's happening in the room. A smaller number of churches do completely separate produced, prepared online services that are produced specifically for an online audience. And even some of the churches that are doing the camera in the room are maybe not streaming the whole service anymore. I know of a couple of churches that have stopped including music, either because it's extremely hard to do well over the internet, or because, honestly, you've probably seen the memes, Kathryn. It's like, here's the band, rocking out, and then here's me at home, and it's Pedro Pascal like eating a grilled cheese sandwich on the couch or something like that. It's hard to, especially if you're watching worship on a phone or a tablet on public transportation, or you're streaming in the car, or floating in the pool. It's hard to really plug into that. But the thing I think that is consistent is the sermon or teaching time. Sermons are certainly not stand-up comedy routines. They're not TED Talks. They're not Apple keynote addresses. But the format and practice of watching or listening to someone or a group of people talk from a stage, that is something that people are used to doing even online. So do you think in an online world that seems more and more driven by extremely short videos, that there's still a place for long-form content like a full sermon? Is it worth us investing in improving our sermon videos, or should we just dump them into the Internet Archive and say a prayer and see what happens?
Yeah, I think that yes, there's still a place for it. I feel like if you are going to watch a sermon, then you're going to watch the long sermon. If you're not looking to watch a sermon, you're not going to watch it. So I don't know that it really needs to be about serving the platform. I think it needs to be
Yeah.
more about serving the abilities, and who are you trying to speak to, and if they are wanting to listen to a sermon, they're going to. Like I think of the I don't know if you remember that platform that launched like at the beginning of the pandemic in like April 2020 called Quibi, that
Mm,
was all about like 10-minute episodes, and it flopped completely, and they blamed it on the
yeah.
pandemic, but I personally didn't think it was the pandemic's fault. I think it was the platform's fault, because they were
Mm,
trying to serve something that really didn't make sense, which is people who want to just watch a 10-minute thing. I feel like you're either going to watch something really short or really long. Maybe you'll
yeah.
look for something that's 10 minutes if it's like a tutorial or whatever, but I think being able to have the sermons is still important. And like you were just saying about the different types of worship and different churches doing different things, I think about my church, and it would be kind of weird for us not to stream the whole service. Like, it would be
Mm,
odd to stream just the sermon,
mhm.
even though I'm sure they do that as an audio thing too. I don't know, being able to have that full service and the whole worship experience, the sermon is just part of that. So, I mean, I think, again, if you're looking to attend a church online, you're going to want to find one, and you're going to watch the whole thing. Like, you're not trying to watch a 30-second church unless that's what you're wanting. And then I'm sure you can find that. Like, it's
Yeah,
available in
absolutely.
any different way. So, I think there's still a place for it, and there's still going to be people who want that. There's other ways that you can adapt your sermon to fit smaller needs, but I still think the long form is going to exist and prevail.
Yeah, I think you're right, and a big part of what we're going to end up talking about today is enhancing the sermon video, but not just enhancing, like making it more entertaining, but actually making it more accessible. And it's thinking about who is the end user, right? Who is the person that is going to be watching these videos, and what do they need to really connect and get the most out of it. And that really brings me to this important thing that we should touch on first, and that is, how do we get people to our videos? Because at the end of the day, this is a podcast about marketing, and we're going to talk a little bit later about how to get people to stick with a video, how to make it accessible, how to make it engaging, but they've got to find it first. And there are some foundational strategies and techniques of content marketing that are going to help people get to your full sermon video. It's highly unlikely that someone who is just scrolling the feed of their social media, app is going to see either an, 45-minute to hour-long service, or even an 18 to 24-minute sermon, and just decide to watch it on a whim. That is not a likely thing to happen in today's world. And so we've covered on some previous episodes of this podcast what we talk about in making content accessible. These are content marketing strategies. So specifically things like titling your video. Too many churches, I see their YouTube page or even their Facebook page, and the title of their worship service or the title of their sermon video is Sunday Sermon, March 24th, 2024, something like that. Or they'll use their super creative but cryptic or pun-based sermon title that might get a smirk or a chuckle out of someone who is, literate in the scriptures or in Christianese, but isn't going to move the needle for the average person, right? You want to remember that, for example, YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. You want your sermon to show up for people who need it in the moment that they're looking for it. And so that means thinking about the kinds of things people are going to be typing in the search bar and crafting your title and even your cover image to show up and to stand out in those search results. You can also create a sort of a marketing funnel that's like a pathway that brings people toward the larger content. Maybe you do make that 30 to 90 second vertical video clip, and the end then invites people to watch a 4 to 6 minute segment of the sermon. And then that ultimately points you to the full message, and it leans into why someone might need this sermon, creating content that draws people forward in the process. And then, of course, your full sermon might end with a call to action that includes connecting with the pastor or joining an online Bible study or visiting in person. I know, Kathryn, you function more on the video production side of things, but what are your thoughts about how to make all of these pieces that surround the video itself things that draw people in and make it something they're likely to stick with?
Yes, I agree with everything you said. I think it's really important to be as clear as possible and as descriptive as possible. And it all ties back into that accessibility thing because accessibility is directly linked to SEO performance. So when you think about titles, you have to think about how that video title will be read aloud by the assistive audio software. So if it's just reading the date, that's really not going to give the audience anything to go off of unless they're looking for a sermon that was said on their birthday or something. But like, I don't know. Other than that, it's like you need more than just the date to feel compelled to click on
Yeah.
it and to watch it. And to me, I know personally, I can find this sort of thing like very tedious and almost agonizing to have to do. But
Mm.
this is one of the aspects that I think AI really helps with. And
Mm.
it makes it a lot easier and a lot less painful. Canva is a great tool for this, especially for, like you were saying, creating the cover images, taking a screenshot from the video, adding the text, making it visually compelling. Then also the alternative text fields. If you have Adobe, Adobe Bridge is one of the unsung heroes of Adobe, and it makes adding in that metadata so easy, and using those alternative text fields is so important in that. And it just makes it, I don't know, it's a lot. It is tedious on the outside looking in, but the benefits of it are so important. And once you get it into a habit of doing it, it just makes it so much easier, and it makes your videos more successful and engaging. And I mean, it's just a great thing all around.
My understanding is that search engines like Google and even YouTube, they are weighting videos that are accessible. And in some ways, it's because
Yes.
videos that have that extra information gives Google and YouTube and Bing and whatever more information about what your video is actually about. Their goal is to serve content that's helpful, and they're not going to serve your video if the AI can't figure out what your video is about. And so it all ties together. Obviously, for us, we have a heart for ministry. We've talked about accessibility on this podcast back in January. We'll talk about it a little bit later today. It is a heart for ministry thing, but it's also a strategic thing if you want to stand out in today's world. Okay, Kathryn, let's say we're now at the point where someone has decided to watch your sermon video. Kathryn, you were a guest preacher at your church. It was 45 minutes. It was amazing. Someone is now ready to watch it at home. And if it is a long form video, more than 4 to 6 minutes, it is less likely, but still possible that someone might watch it without the sound on. Let me actually pause right here. Just ask a personal question. Kathryn, are you a sound on or sound off video watcher?
I am a sound off. For some reason, I struggle to commit to a video with audio because I feel like once I make that step, like I have to watch the whole thing if I'm going to turn on the
Yeah.
audio for it. So I like to read videos until I'm ready to commit to them.
There you go. When that's exactly, I'm the same way. And I think too, more and more people are watching videos in public places, and they might not have their AirPods or whatever with them, and they still want to watch videos. You're standing in line at the supermarket, and you don't have time to, obviously you're not going to watch a 45-minute sermon in the line at the supermarket, but people are watching videos with sound off. And so captions are so vitally important for all lengths of video. And honestly, in my house, we, even with the sound, maybe it's that I'm 40 now, but even with the sound on, we still put the captions on when we're watching a streaming TV show. Maybe more TV shows now have people with interesting accents and things like that. But we can, of course, leave it to YouTube and Facebook to auto caption our videos, but we all know those aren't very accurate. So in your opinion, Kathryn, why might it be a good idea to include captions in our videos? And obviously a longer video might feel like it takes more time, but are there tools out there that make captioning quicker and easier and less painful than we might be thinking right now?
Yes to all of those things. Yes, your video needs captions. Captions are a must. There's not like accessibility itself is not an afterthought. It's part of inclusive decision, and captions are part of that. And so don't think of it as an add-on. I think you should think of it as just another part of your video. It helps with comprehension, accessibility, engagement, everything. And we are very lucky to live in a time when captions are finally not that hard to add on, even though I just said don't add on, but it's
Yeah.
a lot easier to include them into
Yeah.
your video. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm a big proponent of AI, because I'm not really, but captioning and transcription and translation, I think that is like the area that AI is really great at right now, and it's only going to get better. I would consider right now probably the worst that AI in audio is ever going to be. Like, it's always going to get better, and it's
Yeah.
always going to make things a lot easier. And for language, I think that's really important. And so the speech to text softwares now have just gotten so great that um, they're already incorporated into a lot of the video editing softwares that we use. I
Yeah.
use Premiere, and their speech to text auto transcription thing is so great. It's come a long way. It takes you completely from the transcription to the captioning process seamlessly almost. It does, like, the only thing that you have to still do, or you have to still be aware of, and that still takes time, is just the editing, like the manual editing of auto transcriptions. Like when you watch YouTube, you'll notice the captions on there. Sometimes just like words are spelled weird, like they're using the wrong form of a word, or something's spelled wrong, or they've mushed two words together to make a different word. So, but
Yeah.
when you think about how there's different accents and dialects and pronunciations, like of course it's going to be nuanced. So going back and editing that manually is important, and it's good for your audience. And I've noticed, like with Premiere, some of the stuff that I have to edit for the transcription, like the auto transcription, when you've edited your video and you click to transcribe it, I mean, it is so fast and so mainly accurate that it's just a huge stepping stone to get to captions. So once you get to editing it, a lot of it is like the sentence structure that's still a little weird.
Yeah.
Sometimes like the periods are in an odd spot, like punctuation, and then spelling, like my name is spelled kind of weird, so it's not usually the first spelling that an auto transcription will guess. So stuff like that you still have to manually fix, but I mean, it's not a big burden at all. And then once you convert it into the captions, like it will piece them out, synchronize them with your video. It's just a huge, it's like if you've ever had to use captioning software, it is so mundane and just, I mean, it can really like maybe drive you insane if you had to do that like 24 hours a day, because
Yeah.
it is just so crazy. Yeah. But so it's helpful when things like Premiere, and I think even, so like also sometimes what I've done is just go sort of use like Instagram or something to get the transcription of the video, like of a short
Yeah.
video quickly, not even to post it on Instagram, but just to save it back to my phone just so I can have the text on the screen. So like Instagram, any of those social media apps that already do it, Canva is like a great tool. If you're not using Canva, I don't know what you're doing, because it just has so many tools in there that will do almost everything you can think of. And
And it's
so
free for
that's
nonprofits. Yeah.
yes, yeah. And yeah, it has stock images. It just has everything. And it also will, I think that they just added the speech to text thing in there as well. So again, it's not an add-on, it is a must. It's already included. Everybody agrees that they should have captions on it because of the audio thing, because people listen to a sound off, or they don't have headphones, or HBO can't figure out their sound mix through their streaming, so you just can't hear it. So, yeah, it's a must.
Well,
And
and
I think
you
that yeah.
mentioned the ability to copy the text away. So, like, if you create a transcript, it's creating a transcription is really what it is. So it turns into captions, but then that can become a document that then you make available, or you turn into
Right,
devotions, or like it gives you the text of the sermon. And so much of what we've talked about on this podcast, and we're talking about it today, we've talked about it before, is like the sermon is so rich and there's so much there, and it's so sad that so often it gets delivered once in a room and then it's gone, or it gets delivered once and it gets recorded and then it ends up, just falling further back into the archive. And this is just another like silver lining to a way to both minister to people who are served by captions, but also to sort of self-serve yourself by giving you another resource.
right.
And with programs like Premiere, you've got the captions in there, and then you can style them. And what's great is that you don't have to go frame by frame. You can select all of them and adjust the font or typeface, the size, contrast, things like that. Do you have any recommended best practices for things like text size and how much to show on the screen at any one time? Like, what's a helpful display of captions?
Well, so I do have a MyCom tutorial about captions and about adding them in Premiere. So I've
Oh, that's great.
said so I would recommend looking at that if anybody's using Premiere, or just to get a feel for what it looks like when you're using something like that, because I think it looks similar across other editing softwares. But one of the important things to understand first is that the difference between closed captions and open captions. The word open is just so odd to me, but I know it's because it's the opposite of closed. But to me, it doesn't really convey what it is. Closed captions are like what we've been talking about, which is captions that you can turn on or off. And it's sort of up to you as the viewer
Yeah.
to decide if you want those or not. Open captions are ones like that you'll see on social media, where they're burned onto the video. Like, you can't turn them on or off. They're just part of the video. And so open captions are ones that you can style, and that you can decide the font, color, where they are, everything. For closed captions, the styling is determined by the playback system. So if
Mm,
I'm editing it in Premiere, any styling I do in Premiere is not going to translate once you're watching it on YouTube unless I've burned them onto the screen.
right. Yeah.
So YouTube is going to use whatever styling they already use. So my captions, when I add it to it as an SRT file, YouTube will determine the styling. So some people will think that's annoying, but I think of it as not my problem. Like,
Right. Right.
that one less thing for me to have to worry about. I just make sure the captions are there, make sure they are. I focus on the line breaks, the blocking of them on the screen. I wouldn't do any more than 2 lines for
Mm,
captions, regardless of whether they're open or closed. But making sure that the line breaks are correct when you use when you use them in Premiere, sometimes they can break them up weird. Like, they'll have just the word "the" as one whole block, and then it goes to the next one,
yeah.
and I'm like, "Why'd you do that?" Obviously, that's not the whole sentence. So like, just going through and making sure that the line breaks and blocks are match your cadence and are legible and don't disappear from the screen too quickly.
Mm,
That's what you would do and focus on with closed captions. If you're doing open captions, and because you do want them to be on the screen, um, just focus on the making sure they're not too small. Don't ever go below like 16-point font. Colors, it needs to be high contrast, black on white, white on black. If you need it to match like your message or something, or match the theme, then you can do that. But I personally think it's best to just stick to the basic, um, black on white or white on black for those. And fonts, you just want something, you don't want cursive.
Right.
You want like a, just a standard medium weight font, um, even stroke. I would say Arial, Helvetica, Classic, stick to it. You want people to be able to read it, but that's not the focus of your video. So
Absolutely.
you don't want it to take away, you don't want it to be distracting. You don't want people to only take away from the video that the captions were weird. You want it to just be sort of part of it, and almost like people don't even realize that they're enjoying the
Right.
captions and that that's how they're enjoying the video.
Well, that's awesome. Well, then I would encourage everybody to head to the MyCom website and look for Kathryn's tutorial on captions.
Let's celebrate what draws us to the United Methodist Church. The BUMC campaign is a grassroots effort built upon powerful stories of congregations and people of God living their faith, celebrating what draws us to the United Methodist Church and what we aspire to be. Together, we honor the core values that connect the people of the United Methodist Church and calls us to embrace our Wesleyan heritage and envision a promising future. The BUMC Leader Toolkit includes messaging and resources to build awareness and help local churches and annual conferences participate in the campaign. Help us bring the campaign to life. Visit resourceumc.org/BUMC.
Just even in the conversation there, I've really only thought about the captions that get burned on the screen. It didn't even occur to me that we have the chance to upload closed captions and not just trust YouTube. So I'm going to go check out that video as soon as we're done here. But Kathryn, back in January, we did kick off the year talking about connecting with the disabled community, and adding captions not only, fits the trend of people watching with the sound off, but it is a big help in making things more accessible. And those who are hard of hearing, those who process better as readers, these kinds of folks can be served through captions. But we can take this kind of intentional care and accessibility a step further by including sign language. Now, I was fortunate to grow up in a United Methodist congregation that had a team of sign language interpreters that served virtually every Sunday. And if you didn't grow up with that in your church, you might be thinking, well, we don't have anyone that needs that, so why would we include it? But that's a bit of, like the chicken and the egg situation. As we talked about back in January, when you proactively offer certain services, it actually becomes a way of drawing people in who might want to go to church, but simply feel like they have nowhere to go because what they need isn't offered. And so that was kind of how it became sort of a marketing tool here at the church. It's a way to connect with new populations. And of course, the same can be true with your sermon videos. You don't have to necessarily have live interpretation on Sunday morning, but there are ways to add it to the sermon video after the fact, or create a separate version of the sermon video that includes it. Kathryn, what are your thoughts on why it might be important to include sign language? And let's say we've done the work of recruiting or tracking down or hiring an interpreter. How do we go about adding this to a sermon video that's already been recorded?
Yes, I am a big proponent for incorporating more sign language into everyday things. I think it's so cool that you went to a church that had that as part of their ministry. I think that's a really great thing. One of the biggest reasons to do it is that captions and sign language are two different forms of communication and serve way different purposes. So there's not a one size fits all, and they're not a substitute for each other. Like, people who use captions may not and probably don't necessarily know sign language. Captions are read, sign language is watched. For some, sign language offers the more richer experience than captions because of the facial expressions it conveys, emotion, and adds that important context and inflection that you get. I'm sure some people have probably seen video clips of interpreters at concerts, and you can tell that they're adding in that emotion behind what they're signing. And so when you think of that versus reading the captions, like there is a difference. And it's kind of like I can always tell when we get a video script and it's written by somebody who has come from a print background. Like, it's written for reading, not for speaking. So just things like that. I think it's just so important to be aware of the differences and why they're not substitutes for one another, because I mean, they're just not. I don't know
Right.
how else to say
Absolutely. Yeah.
it. But yeah, so when adding it, like you said, I don't know that you don't necessarily need a live interpreter at church. And I would actually discourage that unless somebody at your church is a certified professional interpreter, because there are some differences. Like I am an English speaker, but I would not call myself an English interpreter for
Mm,
anything, or I would never consider myself the expert on that because I'm not I don't know how to professionally do that. And the same goes with sign language. Just because you know sign language doesn't
mm,
necessarily mean it's that you're an interpreter. So outsourcing to a company that already specializes in sign language interpretation, uh, content creation, I think that's a really good way to go. And that will also ensure that the video quality that you get is good and it can be used in your videos. One of the other things is making sure that you're not just slapping it on there just to have it and then not taking into account the or not even considering like the quality of it, or I don't know,
yeah.
just showing that you weren't really focused on it at all. You just sort of wanted to check the box. Um,
Yeah.
so so using a company that specializes in that is I think a really good way to go. And there's plenty of things that do that. There's also plugins that you can do that you can have that you sort of, I'm not really sure. I haven't ever used them. I've only read about them, and basically you would the user can turn it on, and so then it would be a live
Mm,
interpretation of that. But with United Methodist language, there's just some words that aren't in the sign language dictionary because again,
sure.
there's American Sign Language, there's different dialects of sign language. So United Methodist, there's if you go to umdef.org, I think it was in 2015, we recorded a UMC ASL glossary, and so there were certain terms that are strictly United Methodist that just didn't have a place in the American Sign Language dictionary. And so a group of United Methodist sign language interpreters came up with the signs for certain terms that are commonly
That's
used in
awesome.
United Methodist. Yeah, it was a really cool project. And so you can view all the videos of that on their website or on YouTube. And so like just thinking about that, there are just certain things that it helps to have somebody who knows how to be an interpreter and has that United Methodist background. Obviously, that's not going to be everyone, but still
Right.
using a
Right.
company that has that workflow already down and has certified interpreters. That's a great way to go. When you're editing it together, I think the most important thing is just to consider. Again, you want it to feel like a cohesive thing. You don't want it to feel like you've just pasted this separate interpreter video on the screen and that it has no correlation to the main feed. One
Yeah.
of the best examples that I can think of that you can look up are the Apple events. For all of the Apple announcement events, they do an ASL version. So, again, I think that's a good tactic as well, is you don't have to incorporate all of these things into one video. You can make
Right.
you can have one video, you can have a separate second video that is your ASL video. And I think that's a great thing. Like I think some people will feel like, oh, well, that's separating it out, but I don't know. I don't see it that way. I think of it as this is the one that's geared towards this. It's the same thing as like, well, this is the social media version. This is the widescreen version. Like, I don't, it's just,
Absolutely.
to me, it's the same. Yeah. So,
Well,
so if you look at or go ahead.
especially on a platform like YouTube, if you're using YouTube, it's not going to necessarily hurt you in the algorithm to have multiple versions. Where, like on Facebook,
Right.
if you post something and not a lot of people watch it, it kills your reach. YouTube is separate. Their algorithm works different. Obviously, it's still based on engagement, but it's also smart enough to know, like, if you include in the title, in parentheses, ASL version, or, ASL interpretation included, it's going to know that this is a very specific video. And again, just I loved you pointed out in your notes ahead of time the Apple event. If you literally just Google Apple event ASL, they show up, and they're not only excellent examples, but I would just say, like, if a company like Apple is willing to invest in it and they think it's important, then I think it's worth our time as well.
Yeah, I agree. And so using the Apple one as an example, there's two different ways that you can, there's two different common ways, I guess, that you can lay out the ASL interpretation. And Apple does the side by side or like a split screen. They have the ASL person on one side and then the main video on the other. And so the ASL is a little bit smaller. You can do it however you want. I think it looks fine if you have the ASL the same height as your main video. So each window is sort of the same height. And the ASL takes up about a third of the screen. Your main video takes up the rest of the screen. Or you can vice versa. Like the ASL can be your main video, and the other one
Right.
is the highlight window. So split screen works. That is the best way, I would say. Another option, if that just isn't going to work for what you're doing, the picture in picture is a good one too. Picture in picture also might be better if it's not just a sermon. So like a static shot, like a sermon would
Yeah.
be, that really is great for the side by sides. If you have a lot of like images and cuts between different B-roll shots and stuff like that, the picture in picture might be a little bit better. It's still important to focus or to be mindful about the size and the position of the interpretation window. So you don't want it to be too small. I've watched picture in picture on my TV before, and when it first came out, I don't know what year it first came out, but I remember on my parents' TV we discovered it, and it was like so small that I was like, what is the point of this? It's like a thumbnail. So you don't want it to be too small. You want the interpretation window to be at least to take up at least a fourth of the height of your screen. That sounds confusing to say, but I'll have a MyCom tutorial coming out about this soon, so hopefully I can visualize it better there. But you want it to be about a fourth of the screen height and about a third or a fourth, I would say a third of the screen width. So you want it to be big enough like that. But so again, you have to think about where your caption's going to be. You don't want the captions to interfere with the signer because, it's a combination of hand, arm, and body movements. So you don't want anything to be interfering with the interpreter or the interpretation window. You don't want any of your text graphics to be in front of it. You need to really, that's why I say that it's important to consider having an ASL focused video rather than trying to just slap it onto the video you already have, because you do want to kind of tailor everything else to that, to the interpreter and to where they're going to be on the screen.
Yeah, if you're going to include them, make sure that it's actually helpful and useful, like you said, not an afterthought. And this is, got me thinking that it really shouldn't cost a ton to take up that much screen real estate, because specifically when we're thinking of sermon videos, the vast majority of United Methodist sermon videos I've seen, people are either in a pulpit or they're behind a podium. Like at my church, I'm behind a podium. I have 2 blue tape marks on the floor next to me, so I know where the edge of the of the frame is. But a lot of us are using cameras that are either like on a tripod and not moving, or they're a PTZ camera that's mounted, somewhere in the sanctuary. Most of us do not have like professional or volunteer camera people watching a pastor like pace the stage. And so it really shouldn't be that hard to center the speaker on, 2/3 of the frame and then include the ASL interpreter in the other third, as you've said. And so let me ask you about some of the... Yeah, go ahead.
When you think about the person who is wanting to watch the sign language, like they want to be able to see that. So,
That's right.
So like if you're putting the prominent thing on the main, if you're putting the prominent focus on the main video and you're like, well, we can't see them move around. Well, that's not what the person who's watching this is interested in. They're watching the sign language. So just make sure they can see that.
Yeah, it just occurred to me they probably don't care that much about the rest of the screen, because they're literally watching the interpreter. That's funny. Thanks for checking that. That's like, again, I grew up with it, but there's still ways to learn and check your own biases and blind spots.
Well, and that's also good because I'm not a sign language interpreter or I don't know sign language. So it's still important to go to the source and ask directly somebody in
Yes.
that community what they prefer, because everybody has different preferences. So even though I'm saying that, it could be that the person who is watching wants to. I mean, you just don't know. You got to ask them, and you can you start somewhere and then adapt.
100%. All right, let me ask you a bit about programs, because some of the same techniques that we use to add a sign language interpreter, we can also use to add bumpers like intros and outro videos. We can use them to layer on slides. We can use them to put text on the screen. If you are editing your sermon videos in like iMovie, a very basic free video editing program that came on your laptop, you are not likely going to be able to do some of this because you can't layer screens or layer frames, right? You can separate the audio and then you can cut in slides and things like that. It's a little complicated. But if you're working in Premiere, or if you're working in DaVinci Resolve, which is a video editing program that's basically just as, if not more professional than Premiere, but also happens to be free. So there's a bit of an uptake. Like, you've got to watch YouTube for a while to figure it out. But once you figure it out, you've got layers. And talk to me maybe too about Canva. What kinds of programs are you using, and what kind of other ways can we use our screen real estate to make these videos engaging?
Yes, I mean, I will share the gospel of Canva all day long. I think that at work we call it intern Canva, because I mean, it can just do so much. And you can also, I don't like the term like branding, because it just feels so
Right.
corporate.
Yeah.
But establishing like a visual style or aesthetic, or if you need your church logo as like a bug in the corner, you can load all that into your Canva account and have it on hand. Because I know for me personally, what makes stuff tedious is having to find the elements again and again that I
Mm-hmm.
need to make it look the same. If I can set it up from on the front end and have those at the ready, it makes me a lot more productive and a lot more eager to get it done. And so Canva helps with that a lot, because you can store stuff in it. You can keep it all in one spot. You can set up a template where you just sort of drop the layer onto your video, so you have that bug in the corner, the logo in the corner. You can save your intro and outro bumpers and just change the title every week, change the color if you want. I another like there's so many. Canva can be a little overwhelming if you aren't if you aren't normally like an artistic person or a
Yeah.
graphic design savvy person. It can be a little overwhelming because there's so much it can do, but it also can like provide the templates for you to where it does the creative thinking on the front end for you, and
Yeah.
you can just drop in your information. So I think that's helpful in that way. Once you get using, and to me personally, I think the learning curve is it's not an intimidating thing to learn. Canva is. I think it's very intuitive. If you come from Adobe, Photoshop and stuff, there is a significant difference in certain things to where sometimes I'm like, I could do this faster in Photoshop because I know it better.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if I started learning with Canva, I would probably do it way faster in Canva because I would have learned it that way. So I think if you can just get in there and start playing around with it, you'll think of ways that it can help you. And just setting up certain those styles and the like slides and stuff that you know you're always going to use, having those ready to go so that you can just drop them into your video when you're ready to edit it. I think it makes it so much faster and just easier to conquer than if you had to start from scratch and something else.
Absolutely. Well, and one of the benefits too of having these saved elements, and sometimes they call them brand assets, and having those things in there, is you can set up a template, and then maybe you've got a youth or a college student who is either good at video editing or has an interest in it. You can lock certain things, or at
Yes.
least give them the raw materials, and then you can have a volunteer or an intern or a youth or a college student try their hand at it, and they're not recreating it from scratch. You're giving them a template to work with.
Also, if you have to make like sometimes it can be helpful for like a scripture if you're doing like the worship service, and you're editing your worship service and you want to have like a scripture and it's a long one, it can be helpful to have just like that block of text on the screen.
So I'd ask you about using templates to then actually hand off the duties to maybe someone else who's a volunteer or someone you're trying to train.
Yes, that is great. And the being able to, especially when you have like a scripture or something and you want to have the full text on the screen, you can like go ahead and set those fonts and everything so that it's always the same. It always looks similar. I think that, and that way, if somebody else does have to step in, they can easily edit it also. And because I know one of the hesitations a lot is like, well, I set this up, but what if I'm sick? Like, who's going to do this? Why don't we just not do it? Because it won't be the same next time. But there's a lot of things that can help and just make it easier for anybody to step in if your main video or editor isn't there. So yeah, there's just so many options, and I don't know why people wouldn't use it. I think it's great.
Well, and like I mentioned earlier, you have to apply for it, but it is free for nonprofits. So you can get the full professional version of Canva free for nonprofits. You just got to send in a little bit of documentation.
One of the best benefits of it that we've discovered is the stock video and stock photos that it offers are just so great. I think that it pulls from some of the free ones out there like Pexels and other stuff like that. But I mean, having it in there, it also has stock audio. So stock music beds, stock soundtracks, it has that in Canva now. So, I mean, when you get the nonprofit access, it is everything you need. I can't even, to me, I'm like baffled that they offer that. I keep thinking one day they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize we had this turned on. This is not what we agreed to. But because I mean, it just feels like, wow, this is a lot that you've given us, and it's very, very helpful.
That's awesome. Sounds like we'll have to have you back for a round 4 to talk about Canva and all the ways to use it. But lastly, let's just take it up a notch. If people have hung in this long, they're obviously interested in this stuff. And so let's take it to the pro level. Let's say you want to incorporate some of this stuff live. You want to include it in your live stream. Obviously, there's going to be more moving pieces. It's going to require some more equipment, some more software. So it's going to take potentially an investment of money, and it's certainly going to take an investment on the human side of things, volunteers or staff people or interns, and training them and getting them to serve on a Sunday morning. But also, the nice thing is, the more you can include in the live stream, the less you have to edit together after the service. And so if you can come up with a workflow that enhances it in the moment, it all gets done at the same time. And so a couple of pieces of equipment that we use at my church and that you can use to do all these kinds of things are a more advanced presentation software like ProPresenter. I know probably a lot of our listeners are already using ProPresenter or something like it. If you're still on PowerPoint, you can't do some of this stuff, and that's okay. You know, you're at the level that you want to be at, but if you want to do some more complicated live presentation things, you're going to want to look at software like ProPresenter, which actually now has live streaming built into it. However, you can pair it with a streaming software like OBS. OBS is an open source, free live streaming program. It's what most of the streamers on Twitch and on YouTube, people who do this for a living, that's the program they use. Because it's open source, it's constantly being updated and improved. There's all sorts of free and paid plugins that you can add in. But what OBS and ProPresenter allow you to do is to layer things in the moment. So let's say you do have live interpretation in your service, and let's say you have invested in a second camera. You can take those camera feeds and you can pass them through a video switcher like the Blackmagic A10 Mini or something else like that, where you can plug in multiple cameras, and then you can set up in ProPresenter, in OBS, or even with the A10 Mini within the switcher itself to set up a picture-in-picture mode so that you have the live preaching and you have the interpretation at the same time. You can use ProPresenter, you can use OBS also to add in sermon slides. So let's say your camera's perpetually on your preacher and you've got slides going in the background. You can use OBS or ProPresenter to layer in some of those slides or the text of the scripture that the preacher is reading. And so you can do some of this live. Again, we're not going to deep dive on it. For those of you that are interested in taking it to this level, hop on YouTube. You can learn all this stuff. But pairing things like ProPresenter, a video switcher, and streaming software like OBS is going to allow you to do more of these things in the moment. Kathryn, do you have any thoughts on this? Is this something that your church does or that you've seen done well in other UMCs?
Yes, I agree. If you have the luxury of doing any of this on the front end, I highly encourage it. It makes it so much easier. And because it's kind of like having to do the dishes after you've eaten. Like, you don't want to. You would rather just get them done before you even start the main thing. So at our church we use vMix, which is really a really great one, and then we use Vimeo as the streamer. So vMix is our graphics and everything, and we had a really great church member who knew all about that sort of stuff, set it all up for the church, and got it into a system where volunteers can come in and edit it and edit the graphics for each week. It does require just like that time of updating stuff and everything. But once you get it set up, it's really just a plug and play sort of thing. And it makes the process so much easier. And once the church service is over, we turn it off and we're done. Like, there's no extra editing that we have to do. It is just a breeze because of that. And then ProPresenter also is great. We use that at General Conference for worship. And one of the benefits of ProPresenter is because it's geared towards churches, it has the scripture, it has like the Bible, I don't know what you would call it, like built embedded in it, like built in. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's stuff like that. And then it's really good for song arrangements. I've never used that as much, but when I've seen other people use that feature of it, I'm like, oh, okay, I do see why this is beneficial for churches. But yeah, ProPresenter has a lot of good things about it too. And if you can do any of that stuff on the front end, that is definitely the way to go.
We are literally speaking to someone whose full-time paid job is editing videos, and she's telling you do as much of it in the moment as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, having a switcher makes it so much better too, because then you can pull the graphics in and out. Yeah, it's great.
And this isn't going to be true of everyone, but my guess is that it's more common than you would think. You likely have a youth in your church or a child of a family. Maybe the child doesn't come to church, or they have friends who are live streamers, maybe even doing things like green screens and layering themselves over a video game that they're playing. And the kids these days, they know this stuff. They will help you. Mm-hmm. So anyway, lastly, Kathryn, since we last had you on, we've started asking all of our guests to end by offering a word of encouragement. We're doing this day in and day out work of church marketing and communications. Some of it gets recognized. Some of it flies under the radar. Sometimes we only get recognized when the video doesn't work or something like that. And so as someone who does this kind of work and is passionate about using the tools of video and audio and graphics and marketing and things to bring the kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven, what words do you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I would say don't try to take on or add too much too fast. I think accessibility can be very daunting to a lot of people, and you kind of get in your head about, well, what if I do it wrong? But I think every single bit counts. If you can focus on adding and perfecting one thing at a time and then continue growing as you go, I think that's the best approach. And you'll feel better about it too. If it seems too easy, it probably is. And you can probably do it. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome. Well, Kathryn, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to be back. Glad to share.
And now, listeners, we want to hear from you. What kinds of things can be added to sermon videos that you think can increase engagement or make them more accessible? Do you have practical tips or wisdom gleaned from your own experimentation? Email us at mycom@umcom.org. Now, that is a new email address, mycom@umcom.org. We just might share your thoughts or stories on a future episode. And you can, of course, use that email, mycom@umcom.org, to send us any feedback or topic suggestions you have for the show. We always love hearing from you. And as always, the easiest way to support this show and help other church communicators like yourself find it is by sharing this episode with your friends and colleagues and by leaving a review on whatever service you're listening to right now. Did you know that United Methodist Communications has celebrated over 80 years of ministry? Your support ensures that the latest denominational news, dynamic stories, and informative articles will continue to connect our global community. Make a tax-deductible donation today at resourceumc.org/giveumcom. Thanks again for listening to the MyCom Church Marketing Podcast.
The MyCom Podcast is sponsored by Educational Opportunities Tours. EO Tours is a Christian travel ministry that has been delivering Christian journeys of a lifetime for over 51 years. EO's travel experts and on-site hospitality staff handle travel details and ensure safety and health throughout each journey. This, along with curated itineraries, educational resources, and guest speakers, create unique experiences that help develop discipleship, change individual lives, ministry, and the church. Contact them at www.eo.travel or 1-800-247-0017.